And we're live.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, everyone. Welcome, everyone.
Wait a few seconds for everyone to join. Once you do, maybe you can tell us where you're joining from. There we go. People are starting to flood in. Hello, everyone.
Hello, everyone. Hello, guys.
Where are you watching us from? You can tell
We are
us in
everywhere.
the comments.
No, the public, the audience.
The Salon de la Musique is everywhere, right? And how many countries are we in, do you think, Francesco?
How many countries? What?
How many countries we're in?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, we are.
How many countries? You're talking about us? Where are we broadcasting? Or are you talking about
how
the
many-
musicians from the Salon de la Musique?
But I don't even know. I mean, it's crazy. We receive
Come
comments
on,
from
let's see the data.
Syria, from New Zealand, from England, Italy, France, Spain. It's incredible, this community that we
Definitely all continents.
It's incredible.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
incredible.
yeah.
Thanks to all of you that are watching our
Different
live and your all these years already. I mean, it's so incredible because of you. I mean, I'm talking with our friends from the music. We built an incredible community, and that's fantastic. Hey, we just received a message from Croatia. Our dear
Ivan.
Ivan.
Oh,
Hello.
Ivan.
Hello.
Say hello to Ivan. How are you? Write us in the comment. In the comment section.
He's one of our most dedicated fans. We appreciate him a lot. But without further ado, I think we can start this episode properly. Hello, everyone. It's my pleasure to welcome you to this Salon de la Musique community call. My name is Nicholas Stark, and your hosts today are Antonia Comito, Bulkina and Francesco Comito.
Hello.
Hello.
Well, our guest
Hello.
today is Dr. Pamela Mia Paul. On stage, Dr. Paul has performed with the world's greatest orchestras across the United States, Europe, the People's Republic of China, South Korea, and Turkey. In the studio, or in the setting of masterclasses, she's an internationally sought-after pedagogue whose students hold teaching positions throughout the United States and Asia. Today, we'll get a chance to chat with Dr. Paul and answer questions from the audience. Without further ado, Dr. Paul.
Hi,
You've
everyone.
taught... Hi, yes. You've taught
Hello.
hundreds, I imagine even thousands of students. In your experience, what distinguishes the students who go on to become the most successful?
I don't think there's any one thing. Thinking about what constitutes a successful life in music, actually the one thing that I can come up with is a certain kind of luck. And I think each person who establishes themselves in the musical pathway of life has had a different kind of luck at some point in their lives. Yes, one assumes that people are talented, that we're well-trained, well-disciplined, well-taught, worked hard. But I think, and I tell my students this all the time, you don't really know which door is going to open for you. So you need to be ready and you need to be open so that when something does open for you, you're willing and able to walk through it.
So preparedness is the starting point. One must be, first of all, be prepared so that when those opportunities present themselves, then one is able to seize them.
Yeah. I mean, I think about my own life and I think about the various things that happened along the way and why they happened to me and maybe not to somebody else. And there's really no answer other than it was my good fortune at the time that something happened. But when something happened, I was ready. And I don't think I ever said no. If somebody offered me a concert or offered me something to do that I had never done before, even if I wasn't sure I knew how to do it, I figured in my crazy mind, if they asked me to do this, that must mean I'm able to do it, whatever it is. And so I did it.
Wonderful. This is very interesting. The fact that you never said no to opportunities. It is the ones that maybe you considered saying no to. Were they exclusively, did you consider this only because you believed that this opportunity was potentially too challenging? Or maybe were there also other reasons?
Actually, I'm thinking of something that was a breakthrough experience in my life. A manager had said to me, I think at this stage in your career, you need to find a young composer who has the attention of a major conductor, and you need to commission a piano concerto from them. And at the time, I was perfectly happy with Rachmaninoff being a 20th century composer. He did he did us all the great favor of living until the 1943 or something. And so I thought, that's it. And so when the manager told me this, I knew he was right. And in my mind, I said a swear word, but I realized I was going to have no choice. And I went to see the then conductor of the St. Louis Symphony, Leonard Slatkin, and literally said, "Who's the living composer?" Because I had no idea. And he happened to have a number of scores on his desk in his office, and he pushed one towards me, and he said, "Robert Bieser," who I had never heard of. So I went up to New York City because there was a New York Philharmonic concert that was being dedicated to young up-and-coming composers, and one of Bob's pieces was on the program. And I remember first being really excited because the stage was full of musicians. There couldn't possibly have been room for one more person on that stage. And I thought, oh, this is going to be great. And it was, to my huge surprise and shock. I liked what I heard. And I went running backstage afterwards. He had never seen me before in his life. And I grabbed him by the shoulders and said, "You have to write a piano concerto for me." Leonard concert, and Bob pointed to the conductor's dressing room and said, but I have to write a piece for him first. I said, "Well, then you will write me a concerto afterwards." And that entire experience was really one of the high points of my musical life. And it introduced me to the incredibly amazing experience of working with a living composer on a piece they wrote for me. And it changed everything for me.
Yeah, it was life changer.
Can I ask you one thing, Dr. Paul? You said before that you always say to your student, you never know what the future is going to present you, you never know the opportunities that the future is going to present you. My question is, do you think that the students are actually prepared to catch the wave and surf it? Do you think they are actually prepared by the institution to take this opportunity and make them, effective, to make them useful? What is your opinion?
Well, I think some people are ready and prepared, and some people are not. I think an institution can only do so much. Institution, by its very nature and its structure, it has to do things in a certain way, and it can be helpful. You can learn certain things, but I think if you ask any musician what the highlights were of their institutional education, you are not going to get an answer that says, well, they prepared me for a career. You might get, when I think about Juilliard, I think about, of course, my major professors. I think about a piano literature teacher who just opened up everything for us, loved every piece of music, even if it was terrible. And chamber music coaching with Felix Galimir. I don't think about the classes so much. Those were things that one had to endure in order to progress through the institution. Some institutions are better than others at preparing you for perhaps one part of what your career might be. But I don't think the institution is the answer or the complete problem. It's basically going to depend on you, your curiosity, your sense that you need to look into something that maybe you read it in a book, maybe an interesting colleague mentioned something and that lights something off in your brain. So it's really going to be a combination of things. There's no one recipe, and there's no one thing to blame if you come out in your 30s and you don't feel prepared for the life you thought you were going to choose.
This is the perfect.
Sorry.
I wanted to jump in because this is the perfect segue into another question that we have for Dr. Paul, which is a two-part question, really. And the first part is, what do you think institutions do best when it comes to preparing musicians?
General questions, right? You stopped me in my tracks because so many institutions and so many different institutions. I've always thought that who you studied with was going to make the biggest difference in your life as a musician. I mean, to put it in a ridiculous way, if there's a fabulous violin teacher sitting in a tent in North Dakota, that's where you should go if that's the right person for you. certainly the very, very famous musical institutions like Juilliard or Curtis or Moscow Conservatory and things on that level, there's a prestige attached to it. Whether they deserve it today as much as they did when they became famous is an open question. But I think if you go to one of those places, there are going to be advantages and there are going to be disadvantages, like anything in life. If you're fortunate enough to have a strong personality and to believe in yourself, and then to have curiosity, you're going to do well regardless of the institution. And if you are not a good match to the institution that you end up in, it's maybe going to be very difficult for you.
So maybe this is something that students should evaluate when they are considering where to study. The second part of the question is, what instead do you think institutions can do better in order to prepare young musicians for what they will face as, here at Listen on La Musique, we like to say, modern classical musicians. And this is to say, classical musicians that live in the modern era and have to utilize maybe the tools that are available in this year, 2022.
I think some institutions are trying. There has been a movement it's been growing over the last 10 years, and it's continuing to grow in terms of conservatories and music programs, understanding, many of them, that they're going to need to provide some training and some, some direction in terms of musical entrepreneurship. It's not enough to know how to play your instrument well. You're going to have to know how to use whatever the current tools are. Right now, it's social media. Who knows what it will be 20 years from now? When I grew up, there was none of that. There were certain specific pathways that you would try, like giving a New York recital debut and getting a very old-fashioned, real on-paper newspaper review, or maybe even 2 or 3. So in other words, the commercial, let's call it the commercial side of advancing your career, keeps changing. Institutions, again, by their very nature, are going to be a little slower to catch on to trends, but I do see that many of them are trying. Now, training in entrepreneurship is kind of a contradiction in terms, right? Because some people have that spirit and that sense of originality and of looking for something new, and other people don't. But right. I think that's an important thing to introduce. And as I said, a great many institutions, at least in this country, are starting not only to provide those courses, but in some cases to make them mandatory at like an undergraduate music level. So that's one thing that they could do better. The other thing that I wish they could do, and this has to do with money, and so that's out of our hands, literally. It would be lovely to be able to teach fewer students and teach them twice a week, let's say, give them more time, rather than just that 1 hour a week, and then you're almost impossible to see them again in the course of that week. So the old conservatory system of Europe and of Russia, those were places where you really could make a musician.
I wanted to ask one specific question. Maybe I want to add something. For example, if we are looking at specific benchmarks, for example, in like business schools or economic schools, universities, etc., most of the time there is a sort of partnership between universities and the academic universe and corporations in order to give students the opportunity and the chance to go directly in the work world. Mm-hmm. Maybe we have, as a musical world, academic world, we have to adopt this kind of dynamics. I don't know, maybe it can be useful.
No, I agree absolutely. And I think, again, in some places, efforts in that direction are made. In other places, they're not. But yes, in the ideal world, it would be lovely if you are studying a string or a wind or a brass instrument, and there's a good orchestra or several good orchestras in the general area where you live. It would be wonderful for those students to be allowed either to attend rehearsals or perhaps even sit next to or in the back of the various sections and participate. That would take money because rehearsal time, at least in this country, is very expensive and very limited for the major orchestras. Again, there are small, in French it would be tentative, there are small attempts in different places to do things like this. I know Juilliard for a long time has been working on community outreach and putting their students into the public schools. But in this country, anyway, all those things require money, commitment, structure, and people will, by the very nature of all of this, people will be left out.
Do you think that the lack of funds is a greater constraint than the lack of open-mindedness?
I do. I think there's a lot more open-mindedness than one would think. I mean, for example, even where I teach, there are, at the moment, they've begun a process of working with one of the very large independent public school districts to provide some kind of entry-level music lessons to children who can't afford it. There again, it's a question of money. They've started and they're starting small, and they don't have enough money to do even what they're doing right now. They don't have enough money to do it right. So they're trying. And then these things either succeed because someone comes along and says, this is really great, and I happen to have a lot of money that I could give you to support it, or it goes by the wayside. So again, it's certainly not perfect, but you're absolutely right. The more connection that there would be between orchestras and young musicians studying and concert series and solo pianists, for example, the more there would be more chances for more people.
I know Francesco has some thoughts on something
I'm
that
sure
you
he
just
does.
mentioned.
I don't have thoughts. I am really, sometimes I'm really speechless, because if I think that I go to university to be trained and get a job, okay? I go to university, I take a massive student loan on my shoulder. How am I supposed to repay that debt if I don't find a job? I went to a university in the United States. I studied in Italy, and so I can say I have I know the different approaches quite well, I can say. The thing that they told me at the end is, good luck, find a job. The thing that I don't understand is this: we study at the university all kinds of subjects, wonderful, all kind of analysis, history, theory, performance, all these things, wonderful. Everything is useful. But what is really useful also for a musician? How to build connection. But we cannot say that to build connection is something that cannot be taught. So that if you are good in relationship, in creating relationships or connections, okay, you will succeed. If you are not good, okay, is your problem. I think that this thing can be taught. My question is why these subjects are not taught in university, like, for example, such as analysis, contrapunto, or compositions. Why is not required to teach how? I'm not talking about entrepreneurship, because a little bird told me that in some kind of classes, entrepreneurship, they teach you how to send a CV. That's really, it's crazy. How can you send a CV? They teach how to send CV in entrepreneurship class. And so I'm a little bit confused.
How to hire someone, not how to send.
Exactly. But not only how to hire, you need to build projects. That's the thing. You have to have an idea and find not support, as I was saying in a previous chats, not to ask for support, not ask for money, but have a project so good that people will come and invest money. That's the thing. And my question is that I don't have an answer, actually. Why this subject? How to communicate, how to talk?
You know what I think? Sorry for interrupting you. I think that I feel that the classical academic music world is a little bit auto-referential. I think that we have to look at, for example, different benchmarks more. For example, business field, economic fields, because all these topics, for example, creating networks, selling, these are skills that can be trained. And there are, I mean, executive masters in selling, in creating networks. You know, it's something that it's a topic. It's not just your inner skill, natural talent that you can use. And if you don't have you are lost. No, it's something that
Agree.
we can teach how to build networks, how to build communities, how to create networks, how to sell. I think that maybe, we have to look at different benchmarks.
Dr. Paul, what are your thoughts on this? Do you think there is some aspect of business, right, music-related business that can be taught, or is it something that is impossible to standardize and therefore teach young musicians?
No, I agree with Antonia. I do agree that it can be and should be taught. We have a program at our university. We had somebody who started it, a very, very fine pianist, and she was so good at it that it actually launched her into leaving us because she was so busy with her own projects. And I really don't know that the new person has just taken over this year, and I'm not sure what that person is doing. I feel like a fish out of water in this conversation because nobody ever taught me any of these things. Obviously, at my age, nobody was teaching those kinds of things when we were young. You just kind of figured out what to do by watching what other people were doing who were ahead of you on the ladder. But I do agree that there is a lot that can and should be taught. And in some places it's beginning, but it's small. It's not, it hasn't caught on everywhere. And it depends. These programs will always depend a great deal on who's leading it, who's teaching, and what kinds of connections they have in the community that surrounds the university or the conservatory.
But why do you think it's so? I mean, to build connection is something fundamental. It's so important for a musician. So why so many centuries and years this subject is not taught in schools?
Because we were practicing.
That's good. Good. Okay.
we are, particularly with pianists, because we have possibly I don't want to get into a big argument online about this, but the biggest and the best repertoire in the classical
we can if you want, Dr. Paul. This is our space. You can say whatever you want.
But the nature of our particular beautiful beast is that it requires many, many hours every day. Exactly. And I do know that when I was in my 20s, early 30s, I had maybe one or two colleagues who seemed to have what I call the gift of selling themselves. The rest of us were like, I just can't. I don't know how to do it. I don't want to do it. I need to practice. And that was kind of
this mindset. I know very well. Yeah.
I have something to add to it. You see, we are now discussing the problem, like the present problem that we have, we are all facing, that, after we graduate from the university, as people of art, right? So not only musicians, but also other representatives of the art field. We are facing the problem that we need to, support ourselves in some way. Like we need to find a job, like we need to learn how to sell ourselves. We need to learn things about marketing, about, finances, about many things, about the budgets. Maybe we need to learn things about the entrepreneurship. The problem is why we all need to do that is because our field is not officially supported with government. The problem is that, all the money that can be and should be invested in art are invested by private sponsors. Like you will not find any theater, ballet company, or like museum or concert hall that is supported by government, that, they are forced to go to the sponsors to, and beg for money to do the fundraising, events and all these kind of things. So people are forced to become entrepreneurs. People are forced to become like creative in a way because there is no financial support from the government. And I think that is the core of the problem.
Anna, you are so right that the problem that you highlighted now, it's valid also in Italy, where governments support arts in theory.
In theory, that's the point. In theory. Because they think, okay, the art is like least of our problems. It's just something that is so far away from us. Now we should think about, more like everyday's problem, everyday's issues. But the problem is like art is your bread and water, is the air. That's why we are like
It's what gives us the soul as human beings.
Yeah, that's why we are human beings. We are not machines. We are creators. That's what takes that is like take how to rendere diversi.
Like that differentiates us.
Yeah, differentiates us from machines, from the artificial intelligence. Yet, for now, for this very moment, because like artificial intelligence is not just sleeping, is improving, developing, and maybe one day it will rival the human being. But as for now, we are still have hope. We are still different from machines. That's what that's what differentiates us. The ability to create things. So that I think is the essential thing that people with money should care about.
Dr. Paul, do you believe that maybe there is a lack of interest on behalf of the government in the arts?
The arts, if you think about it, they have always been dependent on patrons. If you go back to Haydn, Mozart, Beethoven, that time, maybe before Beethoven, but when they were still, you got to be the court composer, or in the case of Mozart, you had the attention of the archbishop, and you played in the great palaces, and you hoped for a nice purse. People who say, oh, well, people attended concerts in those days, there was nothing else for them to do. And if they were part of the court circle, they had to show up. Hence Haydn's Surprise Symphony. They, after dinner, they were forced to sit and listen to music, whether they wanted to or not. So we've never been, we were talking about classical music and classical art, and what Anna refers to as art. It's only ever been appreciated by a smaller number of the population. So I don't think that it has changed. That has changed in history. Maybe the cast of characters and the scenery has changed. But I think it's also fair to say that they've been talking, since I was a tiny child, they've been talking about the death of classical music, and somehow it's still alive. And many years have gone by since I was a baby. It's just, again, things change, but things remain the same. I do remember, in the 90s, when I was spending a lot of time in Holland with my late husband, who was a conductor. He was American, but he conducted a great deal in Holland. And they were just beginning at that point to realize that the government wanted to pull back on the amount of support it gave for the performing arts. And I remember discussions that we had with friends over there about how lucky you are in the United States because you have private support. We don't know how to raise money on our own. We don't know how to, and our corporations, because they're already paying, and individuals with money are already paying massive taxes. So you can't go to them and ask them for money for this orchestra or that ballet company. So yeah, I think that if you really want to get into the weeds about all of this, you have to go into the taxation systems of the various countries. We have much lower taxes here, but we don't get as much from our government. And it's become an expectation that philanthropists will support, whether it's the arts or the sciences, whatever it is that they are interested in. Whereas in most of Europe, you have very high taxation rates, and it's your expectation that the government puts a certain amount of that into supporting orchestras and opera companies, et cetera. So neither system maybe is perfect. And certainly we're in times right now where things are so troubled all over the world that people are looking for, well, listen, we've got too many people who are going hungry. Why should we give money to classical music? So that's not new. As I said, I think the scenery changes, but the problem is ongoing.
You mentioned
I would like to add something to just a second, Nicola. I would like to add one phrase to what Dr. Paul said. She said that we somehow, as a musician, we always been, working for the archbishop, for the king, for the prince, and now we always depend on somebody else. We expect that the government will provide us, the money, will give us the support. I talk with my friends here, with the musicians. Change yourself. Don't expect that the system will change, because the system will not change. Change yourself. Start to open your ears and ask and question what you've been taught. Question what you've been taught, and start to read and ask for new informations. Find new informations. Look, today we have YouTube, we have Google, we have internet. You can have all kind of information for free. If you don't know how to do something, if you don't know how to sell, if you don't know how to build connections, if you don't know how to use internet, if you don't know how to use anything, go on YouTube. It's so easy. Come on. When we are talking about selling and you say, oh my God, I don't know how to sell. Selling is to find a need and fulfill that need. I mean, do you need a pen? Why do you need a pen? I mean, to write. So here we have the pen. I solved
Sign
it.
your name,
The same
please.
thing with the music. The same thing with music. The question is, we were practicing, so we cannot think about it. The question is, what are you practicing for? What is the need that you want to fulfill? You want to fulfill somebody that, you want to fulfill the need of somebody that plays Beethoven sonatas, but there are so many musicians that play Beethoven sonatas. So why do I have to pay you? What is your unique value proposition? Why do I need to pay you? Why do I need to support you? If the thing that you do is only
talking about
because I play better than the other, so my version is the version of my Liszt sonata is more valuable, so it's different. So come on, guys, start to question
yourself.
something. Yeah.
Okay, we
We
have
have
a
a
question
question
from
from the
our
audience.
dear Ivan. Yeah. So he says, I study pedagogy and soon should start the practice in kindergarten. As a great lover of classical music, how could I hand it over to them or introduce them to classical music? So it's a question to you, Dr. Paul.
Fantastic question.
That's a great question. And that's a wonderful position to be in, because when they're in kindergarten, they don't yet have any prejudices about things.
Yeah.
And depending on how many you have in the room, I would say find wonderful, happy, rhythmic classical music that they can get up and move to. Let them start by dancing and having a great time.
Do you have any examples in mind?
Involve them in some way. There's a lot of really good music for children too. I mean, there's, you have Peter and the Wolf, and you have maybe Benjamin Britten's introduction to the orchestra is a little bit too much for kindergartners, but basically any symphonic piece that you like, that dances, that's fun to listen to. Nothing
Tchaikovsky ballet. Tchaikovsky ballet. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, those would be wonderful, because there are lots of wonderful short movements.
Dances.
Nutcracker.
Dr. Burke, can I ask you one question on this specific topic? What do you think about connecting visuals and music for channeling these art for children? For example, we have a masterpiece that is Fantasia by Disney, conducted by Stokowski. I mean, I think it's an evergreen masterpiece. Then what do you think about hybridizing, I want to say, visuals, images,
it's
music?
A great idea. It's a great idea as long as it's done in the best possible way. I'm thinking of Leonard Bernstein's young people's concerts. He did not try to play music from TV shows or cartoon shows, although in fact in those days they were coming from classical music, but he believed in the greatness and the beauty of really great music. And when you think about combining that with really great art, children will accept what we feed them. So we should be feeding them the best, not cheapening it and dumbing it down. That makes me very angry when I see that happening.
Yeah, me too.
What about the parents? I mean, what about the parents?
Harder to reach. I think you start with the children, and then you hope that as they go through school, that they carry with them some of what you expose to them. The place to start is with children. Parents may or may not know. I think a lot of people that are not musicians and that don't listen to classical music or maybe go to good museums, they're afraid. They didn't grow up with it. They think there's some knowledge that they have to have before they're allowed to enjoy it. They're fed a constant stream of, the musical or visual equivalent of Oreo cookies, junk food. And so that's what they think they like, and that's what they get all the time. So it's, as it always was, it's a question of going into the schools. A lot of first chair, particularly wind and brass players in some of our very, very good orchestras in this country, from a generation of people who are now either dead or they're retired, but they got their start by being introduced to the flute or the trombone or the whatever in public school in the 4th or the 5th grade, because somebody needed to put together a band or a school orchestra. And that was at a time when pretty much every state had enough money to support really good music instruction in the public schools. That's gone in a great many states. It still exists in Texas, and the only reason it does, this is me being cynical, they love football in this state, American football, and that requires a band. You have to have a marching band, and so they have to have kids that can play these instruments, and that's why there is a music program.
Football is keeping the music program alive.
Yes.
It's like during the centuries ago, in church, they needed Pergolesi, Palestrina, Monteverdi, Bach, all this music. I mean, there was a need. And so, but now, even in the Vatican, you listen this guitar playing, I don't know, this cheap song. So, and now we are expecting, that they will give us money. So, I mean, people, they have to give us money. Maybe we should start to reinvent ourselves. I mean, I'm talking about talking to the musicians. Start to reinvent and propose something new. So what Antonia was saying about hybridizing the music.
With other...
That's
arts.
fantastic. I mean, today's we have technology. Why don't we use it? Why don't we use it and teach in schools to students how to... Huh?
We are using it. We are a good example of how to share music on technologies platforms and how to create a value proposition in art. I mean,
that's true. But we are also musicians that started to question something. The problem is here. We started to question something, but in 90% of musicians, they're still there.
Don't worry.
They say, chi vuole essere lieto sia del domani non v'è certezza. They say, no. Translated, Nicola, can you help me to translate this point?
This is more of a literal translation, but essentially it means that there is no certainty of what will come tomorrow. I'm sure there might be an
who cares?
So the yesterday is what? How do you say, like, tomorrow is a mystery, yesterday is a history, and today is the
is a gift. That's why they call it present.
Yes, present.
Dr. Paul, earlier you mentioned in passing that classical music, they say, is dying. So I wanted to ask you about this. Do you believe classical music as an art form is in danger of disappearing, or do you believe it is growing? What have you observed as you've traveled the world to both teach and perform?
I mean, I can't even bear to think of the idea that it would never exist, that there would be a time where it would disappear. I don't believe that. Certainly, if you subtract the pandemic, I've been traveling very regularly for the last maybe 25 years to both Korea and to China, and so many talented boys and girls studying classical music and madly in love with it, and coming to this country and coming to Europe to study. So it's clearly not dead for them. This isn't very practical, so Francesco will jump all over me, but during the worst of the pandemic, when we were really literally shut up in our homes, our apartments, our houses, and we couldn't go anywhere, and there were no concerts except if you were doing something online, which is music online is... But I found myself...
Hold on, Dr. Paul. Don't be too harsh, because that's what Le Salon de la Musique does. And in fact, Le Salon de la Musique was born during the pandemic, and by offering
I know that,
musicians-
but I mean, we need a public. There's
Right.
no substitute for what you feel when you walk
a
out.
live audience.
People there, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, we were talking about this just the other day with Thomas Schwann about how when you perform live, there's just it's almost electric. There's a different feel to it. You are connected to the audience is connected to you, and it's a completely different relationship, one that cannot be reproduced with an online performance. An online performance or even a recorded performance has other positive aspects that are specific to this way of performing, but again, there's no comparison.
I agree with you, and it's certainly, if people will take advantage of it, it presents extraordinary opportunities for people who are not near a concert hall or not in a city where concerts happen, or if they do, they're so expensive that a young person has no hope of being able to hear it. From the performer's point of view, when you walked out on a stage and it was just you and a live stream, it felt like a recording session. We all know that we don't really love recording sessions. In that sense, you couldn't even do it over again. So it had to be right the first time. But I was simply going to say that for me personally, and I'm sure I'm not the only one, just going to my piano in my living room and working on music, not because there was a concert coming, because there wasn't, but just because the music was great. It absolutely saved my sanity. So I don't think that classical musicians are just going to disappear. We will find a way. The way will be different for you guys than it was for me. And yes, one should be looking for new things to do and new ideas and new approaches. That's part of being young and setting out into this field. But the material is so great and so beautiful. And we're so blessed that we can actually put our hands on an instrument and make those sounds come out. So it isn't going to die. It can't.
But can I ask you one thing, Dr. Paul? I believe also that classical music will not die, but I would like to ask you one particular question. Do you know any kid, or a teenager that is listening to Chopin or to Bach not being a musician? Do you know somebody that I know usually listen to Snoop Dogg or Eminem or Linkin Park or this kind of thing, that usually listen to Hammer Clavier?
This is high level. 1 second. This is a high
do you
level.
know?
This is a high level of the pop music.
Or Messiaen, or listen, for example, to I don't know, Missa Solemnis by Liszt or something like, not talking crazy thing like Crowd.
I know hardly any young people who are not involved in music well, that's not true. I have my grandchildren who are teenagers, and I don't think they listen to, I don't know what they listen to, but I'm sure they don't listen to classical
So
music.
who's going to pay the ticket at the concert? We play for each other. Who's going to play in the future, in 10 years for us?
Who's going to play for us?
No, who is going to pay the ticket for us at the concert?
Wow.
Who is going to be our audience?
We play for each other. I mean, musicians. I'm sure they will not die classical music. I mean, if we play for each other.
Was 3-4 weeks ago when they did the Verdi Requiem. I'm sure there were singers and musicians in the audience, but the hall was packed. It was just about sold out. So people,
the fears are overblown.
Yeah. So and on a much smaller scale, the little chamber series that I run in Louisville, we get parents with small children. We get older people who they do love this music. They may not know a lot about it, but they know that when they go, they like what they hear. The responsibility is also on presenters and programmers. One of the things that young musicians need to be taught when they're in school is, how do you program for an audience? And I'm not saying to dumb down, but I am saying if you're going out into a pianist friend of mine invented an imaginary town that he calls Bluebell, Wisconsin, because in his younger days, he gave concerts in a lot of Bluebell towns everywhere. And he said, oh, you don't go with the Goldberg variations and you don't go with Hammer Clavier. You have to know how to program in a way that without playing down to your audience, you still give them something that they have a chance to identify with and to like. The art of programming is very much like the art of curating a painting exhibit. You don't just stick paintings that you like randomly on the wall in the gallery. There have to be connections, whether they're obvious connections or subtle connections. There has to be a reason why we program pieces of music other than, oh, well, I like it and I'm working on it now, so I'll program it.
This is the perfect segue into another question that we have for you, which is, what are your thoughts when it comes to repertoire choice? As a performer, what do you gravitate towards and why?
I've changed so much. I like to say also to my students that pretty much every 10 years, you know, like a snake sheds its skin, I develop a new passion or I redirect myself towards something that really consumes me. But I do think when I think about putting a program together, I think about what seems to go well together, what styles might work well together. I have a great prejudice against putting German and French music on the same program. Those people have never. When my mother was French, and when I was practicing Brahms at home, she was really upset. And I thought, how could you be such a cliche? But so I do think about those things. If you have, it's not a good idea, for example, to do a program that's made up 100% of short pieces. If you're going to do a suite or a series of short pieces, then you have to have a large form structure somewhere else on the program so that it's balanced. I think of it a little bit like the way you would serve a meal at a dinner party. I know that in the early 1900s, it was all meat. It was roasts and fowl and beef and ham and turkey and that, but we don't do that anymore. So you have to think in terms of what goes together musically, what in your mind makes sense.
I want to ask one question, sorry, about the tool, not about the content, I mean the repertoire. I think it can sound a little bit provocative, but for example, here at Les Salons de la Musique, we are working on a project with our company that is hybridizing technology, different arts, and we are analyzing all the mega trends that can be a tool to channel arts. For example, video gaming. For example, also Fantasia released a second, version, Fantasia 2, that used the gaming formula. What's your opinion about this specific topic? I mean, using and leveraging these kind of new tools like gaming, that are languages that new generations understand very well, to channel high-level content such as classical music, art, etc.
Full disclosure, I have absolutely no idea what gaming is, but that doesn't matter.
Video game.
Yeah, I know that there are video games, and I know that people compose music for video games, but that's just there. I gave you my complete sum of knowledge about. I've never done it, and I've never seen it. But you're absolutely right. You want to be using what's going on now. If you want to reach a new audience, you have to ask yourself, where are they? Who are they? Where are they most likely to spend their leisure time? So,
do you know that in many video games, it's used classical music as a soundscape?
And the user or the player, they listen to that music they never heard of.
And they like it, and then they go to search for it on Spotify.
Yes, so
fantastic.
This is
there is a huge amount of example of video games that use classical music that are basically free, with free rights. I mean, with no copyright. Video games that use classical music, such as, I don't know, Moonlight Sonata, and these are tools that can, increase the reach of this masterpiece. I think this can be used and has to be used as a tool.
I agree with you. It's an extremely smart thing to do.
It's sometimes the singer becomes very famous, or the composer becomes very famous when they sing, or their music appears as a soundtrack for the film, for the movie. For example, we know the Titanic movie with the Celine Dion song. So she was already an established singer, and she had many concerts and stuff. But then the worldwide fame she earned when her that song was placed as a soundtrack for the Titanic, the movie. So she became like worldwide famous singer. Also, the Ennio Morricone or Nino Rota, these composers, they would also write some symphonic music and even the concerto for piano and orchestra. But the majority of people would know their music for the soundtrack for movie, right?
Yeah.
So
that's the movies. At least in the sound of music used for movies in the United States has always been a very fertile ground for classical composers, or even for using music of, the famous one from long ago, which you guys don't even probably know, was 2001. And it starts with I believe a caveman throwing a bone or something up in the air, and they were using the music. Also sprach de Zarathustra.
Yeah. It's a Stanley Kubrick, right? The Space Odyssey. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
We know.
Okay. No, but that's, classical music has, it has entered through some very interesting back doors. When was it the last time? I guess it was about 3 years ago, before the pandemic, the last time I was able to spend Christmas with my family in New York. My sister takes me to my one movie a year, because I never go to the movies. And we went to see a documentary about Merce Cunningham's dance company, who he was the partner of John Cage. And the documentary was primarily black and white clips of these dancers doing various things back in the 1950s. And they were using the music of John Cage and then some of his circle at that time. And I was so struck by the fact that it sounded so normal, as did, I do remember being at some of these progressive dance companies when I still lived in New York in the 70s. And it was considered shocking and amazing and strange. And, I don't know whether I like this or not. And it was so normal. It seemed so inoffensive, lovely, not in any way upsetting. And as I was talking with my sister about it afterwards, we agreed, well, yeah, that kind of music shows up now so often in soundtracks, even for TV shows, let alone movies. So people are getting used to it without understanding really what they're getting.
It's like in Moscow subway. You can listen normally Tchaikovsky, and people get used to it. Yeah.
Yes, they build the public. That's
Exactly.
what is really important.
Subconscious.
Yeah. So the people, they not used to classical music, maybe going to the subway, they listen to that music, and so when they listen to that music again, they say,
I know that. I heard it somewhere.
Yes.
And as you say,
also,
now they can go to YouTube and look for it. So
yeah.
Also, this is very important to do with the kids. If we don't expose them to content, to the music in schools, we cannot expect that families they will do it. So it's the school that has to do it, but the school doesn't do it. So
school doesn't do it. So.
What do we do?
What I'm saying is that sometimes they do. Yes, it's hit or miss. And I can only speak for what happens in the United States, but there have always been programs of one kind or another that cover maybe only a very small area of the country or a small area of a given city. That in Fort Worth Independent School District, they have Clyburn in the schools, and they do a wonderful job, very professional job. When I was still a student, that idea was just starting to take root, and they would send like a piano trio, or in my case, sometimes just me, out to a school to play for the children. And it was in its very rudimentary forms, because it was just hit or miss. You went, you played, maybe you saw one face in the audience that was shining with delight, and you realized nobody's coming back. Nobody's coming back to follow up. Nobody is there to give them some information. And it's just, you know, it was like an asteroid hitting Earth. It's gone. But it's progressed a great deal. I've been aware over the years of various organizations that do a very good job of sending dance, music, different things into the schools. And there again, question of funding. I haven't heard about some of them in recent years, which I think may mean that they ran out of money. But it's never gone away completely. It's always there, but not in a massive, organized, we're going to hit every single state in the union and every single school district.
There is
Dr.
can I add the last thing?
Go ahead, please.
I agree that there are incredible organizations. They are working hard and doing incredible job playing for kids. The only thing I don't understand, maybe because it's my limit, when we say there is a lack of money. So how can be lack of money when money is printed every day? There is no lack of money. There is lack of projects, maybe. Because if there are valid projects, really, really strong projects, when rich people, investors, they want to put I'll say, mettere le mani in pasta, I'd say they want to put the money in the pizza and still slice. The money exists. They fund money for every thing. So why there is
when investors see an opportunity
for classical musician? Yeah. So I didn't hear
when investors see an opportunity, they want to jump in. That's what you're saying.
They want to jump in.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't understand why there is not always money for poor classical musicians, for poor musicians. So maybe we should start to reset something in this, this system and way of proposing music.
Musicians.
So Nicola, were you saying something?
This is just to essentially echo what you're saying, which is that musicians should start thinking of themselves as entrepreneurs in a way. And this is also something that we've discussed in this call and that we'll definitely touch upon again in the future. But Dr. Paul, I want to thank you for sharing your thoughts and experiences. They're very valuable because finding these types of perspectives, ones belonging to a pedagogue and performer of your caliber, is still too difficult in the field of classical music. Here at Le Salon de la Musique, with the help of wonderful people such as yourself, we're looking to change that. I want to thank everyone.
Thank you very much for joining us today, Dr. Paul. Thank you.
My pleasure.
We hope you enjoyed this episode.
Yes, I did very much. Thank you.
I personally hope that we will have another chat soon, not next year. So soon it means
3 weeks.
We look
Next year is going to be 3 weeks.
Maybe we can have another next week. I don't know. So really, Dr. Paul, thank you so much for being here. Really, I'm sure that our followers, they will really love to listen to another chat with you and ask a question to you. Also, your friends, write please in the comments a question. So in the next chat, we will talk about those topics that you are suggesting in the comments. Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Dr. Paul, really, it was a pleasure.
Likewise, Antonia.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.